My name is Cass Allen, and thanks for joining me for Play With It. Today, we're talking about dating after trauma. As we all know, there are varying levels to trauma. I cannot list them all in this episode, but I'm going to go through a few things that, come to mind immediately, such as trauma from abuse, death, and other types of emotional bearings. Let's just kick it off like we always do. Today, as I said, we're talking about dating after trauma. Some of us have issues after we've dated several people. We end up developing this baggage. We have this baggage with all of these emotional unrest and unsettled exchanges with people, complexes, and all kinds of things that are tucked in that bag. A lot of times these things come from how we've been treated in the past. Sometimes it only takes one instance of something for us to take on that baggage, and sometimes several where we decide, okay, blah, 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 I'm not doing or I am doing, That the bottom line is it stems from trauma. Trauma in the cases of abuse can be very traumatic. Let's talk about verbal abuse. And I definitely can relate to any category, as I always tell y'all. I'm always happy to put myself in this. Verbal abuse can take a toll on people. Verbal abuse comes in so many forms of talking down at people or making people feel bad for different types of their personalities or for even their existence. Yelling at people can fall under verbal abuse, cursing, saying a lot of derogatory things to a person. After a while, a person can get tired of that stuff and become traumatized to the extent where if you're in a relationship and someone does something remotely similar to someone who's abused you in such a manner that you strike back, usually in a verbal way, or you retaliate as if though this person is the same person who you underwent abuse from. While you're dating, you need to look out for signs like this to make sure you're not carrying on instances of behavior related to someone else and potentially lose an opportunity. We all know about physical abuse, the unfortunate inability to keep one's hands to oneself, Um, it doesn't have to be a punch that knocks four of your teeth out. It doesn't have to be a stab, to your abdomen. Physical abuse is physical abuse. Whether you're taking your hand and wrapping it around someone's neck, or you're spitting on someone, or you're blocking someone's way in or out of a room, those are still physical acts which are being abusive, which means you're holding him or her against or them, excuse me, against their will. Um, this happens early in dating, unfortunately, as well. There are people out here. I've heard so many instances, and I know so many people who have been abused physically and verbally. These things can happen so early on, first date. Several females I know have been raped. Just on the first date, the physical abuse has gone crazy. Or during the first date, someone wants a kiss that you don't want to give up. And the next thing you know, you pinned on a fucking wall with someone trying to stick their lizard tongue down your throat. You know, um, and unfortunately, when people face instances like that, it can make it difficult to even go on a first date. Or someone may be going to whisper something in your ear and you may slap them or recoil because you think this is about to be that kiss that you experienced before. Again, another point to how we need to be careful on how we present when we're going out and dating. Whether it's the first date, the second, the third, it actually doesn't fucking matter. simply talking about being aware of your own PTSD behavior and how it intersects in your life. Really think about your reactions and why do you react the way you do. Is it because of something that's happened in another situation? There are people out here dating who have lost their mates, whether it's through age or some tragic event or some type of health issue, it's still a loss. Sometimes it takes people a long time to get back in the dating field after losing a mate, especially if it's someone that you love. When you have someone verbally abusing you or physically abusing you, you tend to get mad at that motherfucker and you can't wait to leave them. So, even during dating, so you don't feel the impact, the same way necessarily. Um, as opposed to losing a mate who you love, someone who you're still entwined with, someone who you imagine spending more years with. Some people can become so consumed with that loss that they start comparing all of the people in their dating pool to that loss, which is unhealthy. That's the bottom line. Again, like I said, I'm not a psychologist. I've studied some things throughout my life. I'm educated fairly enough in arts and sciences and health, but I'm no genius in any of those areas. Again, I speak from my own experiences and those around me. I've seen people have very difficult time with loss. I had a very difficult time with the loss of relatives that changed the way I dated because I just wasn't in that headspace. So I can't imagine losing a mate, and then filling that void, because there is no such thing as filling that void. And many of us tend to pressure people to move on. It's time for you to date again. We don't fucking know. We don't know the depth of love that these two people experience with each other. Imagine being with someone 40 years and you lose them. 40 years and all of a sudden they're gone, and 6 weeks later, 10 weeks later, 12 weeks later, 30 weeks later, your friends are telling you to go out. Go out, go out. You got to move on. So and so is gone. Do we really have the right to say that to people? Or maybe we should take a different approach, you know? And I've seen people consumed with talking about mates they've lost, or every little thing reminds them of lost mate while they're out trying to date someone new. I've been in that situation with someone who lost a mate, and 90% of our conversation was about that mate, the person that I was attempting to date at the time. We probably lasted 6 weeks. I'm not quite sure if it was that long. I appreciated her grief. I explained to her that I was cool with her grief. I supported her grief, but I didn't want to be in a relationship like a therapist. Just 90% of my time is spent listening to someone talk about a loss. I'm not sitting here trying to conquer anything. So, I have no motive here. And I offered myself to her, more as a friend. I told her I didn't want to date her and I told her why. Unfortunately, she didn't take it well, but, the bottom line is I think I did the right thing. I wasn't in a position to listen to this stuff for 90% of my time with you, because that's not the type of relationship we had. It's not like we were friends and you had a mate and you lost your mate and I'm there for you. I'm your rock. I met you and you wanted to date and you want to spend 90% of your time in the past. That's not for me. People, as I mentioned earlier, slightly yelling, some people think that's not a form of abuse, but it is. Some people can't handle the emotional swings that come with yelling. It makes the heart race, the blood pressure goes up. Some people get nervous, some people shake, some people sweat. There are all kinds of things that happen to some people, and the person yelling is normally immune to that shit. That's why they're yelling in the first place, you know. I personally can't deal with the person who yells a lot because of the way it makes me feel. It contributes to me feeling uneasy. I may have said this more than once in the past. It's important to me not to date a yeller. You can get upset, you can raise your voice, but I'm talking someone that's like on 100 at the top of their voice, just yelling in my ear. I've been there, I don't like it, and I don't ever want to do it again. It's the bottom line, because that's a trauma area for me. That's something that makes me feel very uneasy. That's something that makes me very, very uncomfortable. You can be mad at me. Like I said, you can even curse me out on some instances, depending on the situation, but I can't do that 25 on the voice. And luckily, I don't have to do that at this point in my life because I am dating someone who has control of the yell. Um, you also can get trauma from insecurity. Some of us have dealt with insecure mates, people that have been overly undervaluing themselves, someone that you believe is beautiful and this person doesn't feel the same way. Um, that is a form of trauma that we can actually, the person that's being supportive can actually take into another relationship. If you spend a lot of time with someone who's always devaluing him or herself or always saying things that are always relative improvement, there's never a great job, good job, you look fantastic today, not even one. That's something to be suspect of insofar as insecurities or someone who needs that constant, excuse me, attention of tell me I'm beautiful all day. And I'm going to stop this for a minute. I'm not shunning anybody. There's somebody for everyone. Somebody may want to do that for you. That's fine. We're simply pointing out all different types of things that can create trauma. Of course, there are people who are immune to all these things, Depending on how I feel about you, something affects me or doesn't. And I would expect that is the same for most people on this earth. So back to where we were with the insecurities. In a situation like that, when you're dealing with a very insecure person and you move on to dating other people, it may be a person that says one thing. You say, "Oh, your lips are beautiful," and they go, "I don't like my lips," and you automatically categorize them as you did that person who was excessively that way. That's what I'm talking about here with dating with trauma. We're bringing things from past dates into our current dates, thinking they're going to go the same way. Forgetting that it took like A to F to get where you were with the last person. As soon as you see A with the next person, you automatically in your brain instinctively add the B through F and write these people off, not realizing there's several more letters where this person can take a different turn, and this situation may not be a repeat of what you went through. So you lose the opportunity to experience now because you're making judgment based on back then. Um, and that's a form of trauma that often gets missed. People don't realize their own insecurities and the insecurities of other people created situations where they're not taking opportunities because they're being withheld back by their own thoughts. That possessiveness to me is a type of ownership. You look the word up, that's what's there. I own you. You don't fucking own me. I've had situations with people where they've been offended by that. Like, no, you don't own me. We are two independent people who happen to be meeting and enjoying each other's time, each other's company, time, and space for as long as possible. Because the day this is not working like in an egregious way, I'm doing a pullout, and I would hope you would do the same. But again, there are people out here who become very possessive. Everywhere you go, it's not like they want to be on your arm because they want to hold you. They want to be on your arm so everyone sees that they're with you and no one will look at you, or they make statements to make sure everybody in the room knows that you're together. I personally feel when two people have chemistry and magic, everybody sees it, even if they try to hide it. There are plenty of people out here who got busted, and I'm sure we've all seen a situation, maybe not in your real life, but on TV where someone's like, oh no, bitch, you getting some. Or, oh no, I see it, that energy between you two, something's going on. So you don't need to do all of this flaunting of a person and always letting everybody know I'm with you like you own me and my life is now it's yours. I've been taken like a kidnapping, you know. It's unhealthy and then it can also create a trauma for the person who's experiencing that again. You're dating because you're not with this person anymore because XYZ is too possessive. So you start dating someone else who grabs your arm in the room. The first time it's done, it may trigger this because so and so did it. Allow at least a few more instances to see if this is something that's going to happen all the time. This is what I talk about with triggers, immediately, oh no, she grabbed me up like she owns me. We're not doing this. There's that possessiveness, there's that sometimes it's the borders between possessiveness and just appreciation. So, while you're dating, of course you got to watch for it, but watch enough where you don't make a mistake, being too caught up in your traumas that you start laying out a map that doesn't exist just because you're on a start here point. Um, Unfortunately, some of us know what that is to take it to the like 10th power where it turns into obsession. You know, People who, when you get to work, they're there waiting for you. People who want to be on the phone with you the whole time you're on your way somewhere to make sure you get there. People who want a phone call every 6 minutes to make sure that you're doing what you say you want to do. People who got their eyeballs outside the door as soon as you get home. People who ask you a question about everything you've done from all the time that you were not with them throughout the day. People who sit by the bathroom door where you shit. That's what we're talking about right now. Those people that are so obsessive, those people that call us all day and all night, those people that don't want us going out with our friends, those people that want to be there when we go out there with our friends, those people who want to meet our parents, those people who want to go everywhere we go, those people who, if we go out the door without them, want to make sure we are dressed down in some type of missionary style relative to a religion. These are the people we're talking about right now. The obsessive that definitely end up on the bottom of the totem pole at some point because you can't take it anymore. You can't take all this attention. You need to breathe. You go to the shower, they're carrying your soap. You go to the kitchen, they're carrying your plate. This kind of person. You know what I'm talking about? You go to the bedroom, they're carrying your negligee for you. You hold your stomach and they grab a porta potty and they sit it under you and hand you a napkin. The obsessive, you know. This can definitely set up trauma for people to the point where once you get out of a relationship like this and start dating again, the first little instance of something that looks like obsession, just a little inkling, will have you suddenly not calling someone again. You know, Someone might take you out on a date. And after the date, you may have written something cute on a napkin and they take it home and you're like, oh no, we ain't doing this fatal attraction again. All they did was take the damn napkin home because you're so traumatized from the last person that you dated. They got 60 little napkins in her drawer with her kissing lipstick on them that were under your drinks. So now you're scared of every napkin. I know it sounds like a silly situation, but things like this happen where we have triggers and sometimes we don't even realize how deep our triggers run, you know. That's part of how I ended up on the yelling trauma list because at one point it was so prevalent that it shut down that part of me that could handle that type of energy like for good. It's like the fuse blew and we're not even gonna let you get a flashlight back here so that you can turn this behavior on again. You know? So we got this obsessive behavior as we were wrapping up where people don't allow you any opportunities to be in your own space because they want to see you 24/7. They basically want to do a CT scan on your body all day so that they can know every nuance of you from the outside to the inside. Some of us get traumatized from zodiac signs, you know. I personally have a zodiac sign on my list that I don't want to date again. I'm not going to mention it just to, be show some dignity with people I've dated in the past. But I know plenty of people who say they like somebody, they think they're cute, they think they've got a little good language, and as soon as you mention their zodiac sign, and y'all know it to be true, three words. Oh, hell no. You're like, no, absolutely not. Those are two other favorite words. You don't care how much money they have. You don't care how cute they are. You don't care how smart they are. There's two other words. Fuck no. It's like, we're not doing this. That's because I've been so traumatized by the two that I dated that I don't want to put a third on the list. And think about how deep that must have been. That you take a category of a zodiac sign. A zodiac sign is a big ass category because they're only 12. So what if we had 6 billion people? How many people is that? Y'all do the math. That's a lot of people that have lost the opportunity to be with you. If it's a relatively equal distribution of zodiac signs. So imagine the trauma that you're willing to knock off that many people for the rest of your life. They'd be like, no. And like I said, I'm not saying they because I'm not like that. I'm in that category. I have a zodiac sign that I just don't want to date because I've had an opportunity a couple of times and I was traumatized. I don't want to be traumatized a third time. And even if I were not going to be, I'm not willing to gamble. I'm not willing to take the risk. So a lot of trauma is in correlation to risk. I'm not willing to take the risk that this is going to happen again because I was so traumatized. So if I see a sign of this behavior, I'm done. Same with age groups, Many of us like to play across the borders. The young are like, yeah, I'm the shit because I'm knocking off this older person. And the older people are like, oh, girl, I look a lot older, a lot younger than you because I'm getting, young love. So this thing is all caught up and all this ego shit is flying and attraction. And many times, as we've mentioned in the past, it doesn't work. Yes, some things work with large age groups. And when we talk large age groups, we're basically talking like 12, 15 years and much and over, because of a generational gap, not because of maturity, but because of generational issues, things that haven't been experienced, things the person doesn't relate to, that lead to less compatibility in some cases because you don't have certain things in common. Sometimes the physical challenges, we both cute when you're 20 and I'm 40, but when you're 40 and I'm 60, we might not have that same physical compatibility. There are a lot of things we can talk about, but that's not tonight's show. But the bottom line is we can be traumatized by dating. I dated much older women when I was younger. I didn't get traumatized and I had some good experiences. I learned a lot, and by the time I got older, I was one of them, but I was more traumatized in reverse, dating someone younger. And today I don't think I would do what I did back then because I was a little traumatized by the age gap in reverse, So, like I said, I don't have that issue because I'm not dating. Well, I'm dating the woman that I'm with. That's it. I'm not out there looking for anybody where I even have to think about anything on this list. So I'm happy for that too. You know, a lot of times age groups create trauma to the point where like myself like I'm not dating anybody 20, 30 years younger than me. I've never dated anybody 30 years younger than me, for the record. That's just an example because I see it out there. It's based on the things that have happened to me in the past with the several women that have come to me for an opportunity to date my old crustacean ass, I have elected not to date that age group. Maybe if I'm 90 and a 70-year-old want to hit it, and my baby and I no longer have a relationship, that's different. But because she old bitch like me. You understand what I'm saying? That's very different 20-year-old gap than a 20-year-old gap down in the reverse, as I used to try to explain to some of these women, Y'all think I'm cute now, but what about when I'm 70 and you 50 and your ass is still bouncing up and down and my ass looks like a raisinette? What about when you want to go out dancing and all I want to do is make it to the bathroom to pee? Are we compatible then? So I haven't been willing, to venture down that path much in my past, and I still stand by some of the things that I stand by, even though I believe it can work. Of course, two people can be 40 years apart in age and it can work. But do you see that shit all over the streets? Keep it real. Or do you see the one anomaly couple that you see on TV where it works, or the one couple per state? It's not like it's working all over the place, else we would see it everywhere. Racial mixes are surviving at a better rate than age gaps. Let's keep it real here. It's just not as common as y'all want to pretend because you want to have a reason to use those genitals and be menacing with them. The bottom line, as we've discussed these, I don't know, probably roughly 10 different, categories of trauma, they affect our dating. We have to be careful that we don't carry them into our dating. We have to be aware of when our triggers are even present. Some of us don't even know. The thing to do after you're upset, after you're mad, after you're in those negative spaces, ask yourself fully, why am I here? Not just to say, oh, so and so said something to me, but ask yourself, why did so and so's words affect me? That's when you really start getting to the root of what's going on with you. Instead of using people's behavior as a reactive measure to justify your behavior. I personally don't buy that from people, no disrespect to y'all, but I've been in situations where two people can do the same thing to me. One bothers me and one doesn't. So I can't fall on a principle of Sally did this to me, therefore, else I would apply it to Sally and Dilly, to make up names. I treated Sally like I want to fuck her up, but Dilly, I didn't mind doing it. So it's not about the action. That's why you got to go deeper in yourself and find out what really makes you tick, not just your talks. That's where you find your healing. When you're brave enough to ask yourself, what is it about this person doing this one little thing that bothers me so much? Why does it bother me so much? You got to unpack that shit. And that's where you find out a lot of times that, you're not bothered by the person. You just having some issues within yourself because you going through PTSD. These things are triggering past experiences that are making you feel uneasy. It's not because of who this person is. So to wrap this up, understand yourself. I'm a proponent more today than ever of learning yourself. I spent 3 years not dating in the past 10 years on purpose. I feel pretty good about myself, my mental, my physical, all those things that I'm capable of getting a date. If I open my mouth and talk the right game, I believe I could get a date, fairly easy. But I chose to take 3 years not to date so I could learn myself. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life because I claimed my own self. Today I know more about myself than I've ever known in my life. I know some of the things that make me tick. I was able to deal with some of my traumas as I began to realize that I was reactive based on past situations versus what's happening today. I learned that some of the things that what going on in my life was self-induced, because once you put yourself in a solitary confinement of sorts, you no longer have the opportunity to blame the people in your surroundings for things, you know. You can't blame your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mate. This your fault. This your energy. This is your shit. Oh no, bitch, you woke up in a bad mood and that's why I'm in a bad mood, bitch. You know, you don't have that opportunity when you're not dating. When you wake up and you're in a bad mood, that's your shit. And you have no one, there's no place you can put it. You know, that's one of the beauties about spending time by yourself. Your shit is your shit. You know, and if you spend enough time by yourself, you can heal some areas where you do have trauma, so that when you are ready to step out there and chase that monkey ass that I talk about in just about every show, you're in a healthy mental state to go out there and be successful and not allow yourself to be traumatized and end up, like I said, in a very small dating pool. So y'all already know it's been a half an hour, and y'all know we got to end this. Why? Because we all got things to do. This has been Cass Allen, over and out.